Hello, Uganda. Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hotseat on 933 KFM. I welcome you, our listeners across this beautiful land, the Pearl of Africa. My name is Patrick Amara. Tonight, we focus again in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the developments in the eastern city of Goma, which has fallen to the rebels of M23. And Goma is just on the border between the DRC and Rwanda. And of course, Rwanda has been accused by the international community for getting involved in the mess in the Congo. What will that mean for Uganda? Especially considering that Bunagana, border town of Uganda on the border with the DRC, is only less than 100 kilometers to Goma. And Goma has been and is always a very lucrative business for Ugandan products for us to trade with the eastern DRC. And what does it mean for the entire region of the Great Lakes region, or even the East African community? My guest this evening, I have, from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, Mr. Godba Tumashabe. Thank you so much for joining us, Godba. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you. Great pleasure to be here. Good evening, our listeners.
We have, from the President's Office, Senior Presidential Advisor, Mr. Moses Biarhanga. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Patrick, my colleague Godba, who is in the studio, and our listeners out there. By the way,
yes,
is Becky listening in?
Yes, I suppose she is.
The new year started.
We shall take it.
Okay. Becky, we need a new year package.
Okay. Let me begin with you, because sometimes you are, not most of the times, you're super focused on the Great Lakes region. Because
that's Greece.
That's Greece.
That's what we do for a living.
That's what you do for a living.
Yeah.
Did you see this coming? And this time around, the problem of the Eastern DRC stems way back even in times of colonialism.
Yeah.
What will they do, the people of Congo and the people around that region, to really solve this problem?
It's really not an easy problem. First of all, the problem of DRC is rooted in the whole concept of authoritarian regimes. So Mobutu's regime was an authoritarian regime. What authoritarian regimes do everywhere is that they invest in demobilizing institutions of state and institutions of citizenship. So whenever they collapse, they basically, the authoritarian ruler is the main institution. So when the ruler dies or something happens, basically the entire state collapses. So essentially, with the demise of Mobutu Sese Seko, it was only inevitable that Congo would be plunged into a crisis. And I think even now, the current situation is a product of that brokenness of the regime. Because when you have authoritarian rulers, they don't build institutions that guarantee certainty. So whether they are executive institutions, the presidency is basically encapsulated in one individual. In most cases, there is no legislature, or if the legislature is there, it's a patronage institutions. You destroy the judicial system. So, in other words, when there are conflicts like we've had, people cannot revert to these institutions to seek redress, and therefore there is a lot more of self-help. But more so, these regimes built armies and other security agencies around them. So what you have is more of the regime protection forces rather than national defense forces. So that's basically it's standard, and you can see it across the board, whether it is here, whether it is in DRC, whether it is in Libya, whether it is in some of the countries. See what's happening in Sudan.
The problem of Congo is that area of Goma. Precedes Mobutu, precedes Kasavubu, precedes...
No, but you see, the expectation would have been that if you had a strong central government in Kinshasa that is able to build institutions of state, they should have been able to prevail over some of the grievances and the conflicts. And because you see, an effective state invests in ensuring control over its territorial borders and guarding against any foreign aggression. So all these countries, they have similar problem because they are basically they emerge from colonialism. Colonialism was a very disruptive phenomenon across the board. So in other words, none of the countries can just say for us we are colonized, because that's a historical phenomenon. It cannot change. What changes is that you have a leadership that understands this background and this context and is able to build the institutions that can then build a state that is able to outlive some of these historical phenomena.
You seem to have left off the foreign element.
I was coming to that because they are kind of like two other important points that we need to highlight. One is the richness of Congo as probably the biggest depository of minerals around the world. That the most strategic precious minerals are in DRC. These minerals are needed by almost everybody. So if you cannot have effective control over your territory, then you have every Tom, Dick, and Harry coming in, and because they want to partake on these resources, in Runyankore we have a word called kabetemere, that if you have a garden or a shamba which has no owner, every Tom, Dick, and Harry will come in and try to grab something. And thirdly, Congo has also been, DRC has been really unlucky that it's also, I think its instabilities have also have been a cause, but also the effect of an unstable region.
Okay, let me come to you, Mr. Moses Byarhanga. I understand the head of state, who's the chairman of the East African community at the moment, President William Ruto, is calling for a regional summit. Is Uganda participating? Is President Museveni taking part in this meeting?
Of course, if it's confirmed, why not?
So what do you make of the crisis in the Congo?
Well, it's unfortunate, but expected in a sense that, you see, Godba hinted on it. As a student of political science, when I was studying political science at Makerere many years ago, the definition of a state is a group which has a capacity to exert force over its territorial boundaries. Meaning, for you to be called a state, you must have the institutions which can enforce security within that boundaries you call a state. That's what differentiates between a state and a nation. A nation doesn't have to have boundaries per se. That's why you can say the Arab world, the Arab nation, the Islamic world. It is borderless. But a state must have some geographical identity. Now, for you to be called a state, you must have effective control over those boundaries. So, we know that in Congo that has been lacking. To have effective control within your boundaries. We were in a similar situation in Uganda many years ago. When you had the time, for instance, when NRA was in the bush, the government at that time could not have control over the whole of Uganda and say you can't stay here. Also, there could be criminals, but to say that that area is cut off, the government forces cannot reach it, then you're not a state. You are something in between. So, to be a state, so we were in that category at one time. We emerged from it. Now, for instance, now when after the election of President Sekedi and even Kabila Jr. before him, what they didn't do, they have a lot to learn from us. I wrote an article sometime last year, I think around November, October, about, I think it came out in September or early October. What I was saying, what Africa can learn from Uganda's experience. There has been emphasis after maybe like a takeover, have elections, have this, have that. Okay, elections are good, fine. But elections, in what environment? For me, the most important thing is, like the DRC, to build a strong army, train it, make sure it is national, and so forth, so that you have that element of a state, even before you have elections. Whoever is in charge, you must build an army strong enough and well trained in numbers and so forth to ensure that you have effective control over your territory. Now, this question of the M23, because the M23 has been in Congo for so many years. We have been talking about ADF in Congo for so many years. Why we have ADF? Because ADF can go and occupy a space within Congo and nobody touches them. Because the government, wherever it is, not in effective control. It's in control, but not effective control. That every inch of their state, of their territory, at least can be monitored or can be, nobody can stay there and be known to be in a certain place unless you are just hiding. But if you are known and you raise your arm, your head up, they should be able to deal with you. So that's the challenge you have in Congo, the challenge you have in the Central African Republic, the challenge you have in some of the other countries. You see, in West Africa, we have had this Boko Haram. Can you imagine? In a country like maybe I shouldn't go that line because of no. Let me finish. You see, unless you address that issue of effective control. And how do you effectively... So, both the international community and even with the neighborhood, we should be assisting such countries like now Congo, South Sudan, to have whoever is in charge to have effective control. Now, but the other means could be if you cannot go into issues of training the army, equipping it, and so forth. If there are groups like that one, talk to them. Have talks with them. What is it that makes them against you? And on that one, there's also learn from in respect to Uganda. So Moses, Uganda, even when we had insurgency in the north, we opened up to talk to COIN. We opened up to talk to UPA, Uganda People's Army, which was in Teso area. We talked to the Rescue Front, or the one was Moses Ali, and some of their political leaders, the groups which were fighting Uganda after the M7 takeover, were talked to. Some of the political leaders were absorbed into the government, and some of the military people were absorbed into the army. So that you create consensus and harmony, so that you create that strong army ready to defend every inch of its territory. I'm sure you are aware, Moses, that the Congolese were very angry with us as well. In Kinshasa, we saw the ransacking and looting and breaking into the Ugandan embassy. So, which means also, according to them, the problem is not that they themselves have not failed to control their territorial boundaries, but also that they're choosing Uganda. That's by the way, because... How does it become a by the way? It's a by the way, because in Uganda now, nobody... ADF has been in Congo. Have we gone to ransack the embassy in Kampala? No. Have the effective control. Irrespective of who is supporting this group, you dismiss them from there. Make sure that they don't come into your territory and take over land and even capture a whole city. That's what is important. So, yes, if you're talking about ransacking embassies, even some embassies from Western countries were ransacked, but that's not the issue. The issue is you, Congo, DRC, have capacity to defend your territory. Okay, and go to very briefly before we take a break. What do you read from the Congolese anger in attacking the embassy?
Actually, I wanted just to maybe just clarify a number of issues that on the key issue that Moses raises on effective control, the question of statehood. This is a major principle of international law. Statehood, there is criteria for recognizing a state under international law, as set out under the Article 1 of the Montevideo Convention, which is basically you have to have a permanent population, defined territory, an effective government, and then capacity to enter into international relations. Those are like just the 4 criteria, standard criteria. But you see, the point that probably most misses is that all these countries, so effective control is not just about the army. It is the government is more than an army. You have institutions of state, which include the army. So you can actually have an army, and just you have an army, but then you don't have effective control of government. When you think of countries like Sudan, of course you can't say that Sudan didn't have an army.
Which one?
The Sudan proper, should I call it Sudan proper? Sudan Khartoum. I mean, it had an army. If you are thinking of, a credible fighting force, you wouldn't dismiss Bashir's army. But right now,
but did it have effective control?
I mean, what did they have other than the situation in South Sudan?
And Darfur.
And then afterwards, after South Sudan gets independence, they don't control Sudan and Darfur. So
Darfur is still on their side.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that
it's still on the upper Sudan.
You can't.
You don't have control.
Would you say that Gaddafi didn't have an army that controlled Libya?
No. That's a different matter. How different it is. You see, what I'm saying here about effective control. If you are using the legal side, but from the political point of view, what we call a state in political science, it must have effective control over its own territory. Okay, the example you're given of the old Sudan, before the breakup of South Sudan, it didn't have effective control of South Sudan because there was a SPLA there. It didn't have effective control over Darfur, and over time, up to now.
And all right, gentlemen, we're going to take a break, a mega milk break.
The hottest debate on...
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest this evening, I have Senior Presidential Advisor, Mr. Moses Biarhanga, and I have Mr. Godbert Mushabe from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. Godbert, what does it mean when you have a head state of a neighboring country under such a crisis is actually being on record saying that the people who are attacking Goma are actually M23 that are resident in Uganda, and their commanders are from here? And will it even surprise you when the Congolese rise up in arms and even attack our embassy?
No, it's not surprising in the sense that, because you see the Congo situation is very complex. This is a war that dates back to 2006, the famous Africa's World War. I mean, that's where it started from. From that time, it has never stopped. And the players have been, shifting and changing and expanding. When you look at the actors and the active militia groups and insurgency groups in DRC, in Eastern DRC, they have been increasing. I think at this moment they are estimated to be over 120 insurgents and militia groups. There have been many changes in the countries within the region, including changes in terms of leaders in DRC. I think in Tanzania, in Kenya. The one thing that anybody trying to deal with this conflict has to appreciate is that the two most important constants in this DRC, actually Great Lakes region, sometimes to describe it as DRC is also not taking a holistic picture. President Museveni and President Kagame are the constants in this conflict. As long as the conflict has been there, they have been around. And in fact, in my other discussions, I've said, until these two either agree or they are no longer holding their positions in their respective countries, I don't expect any new changes in terms of the overall posture of the conflict in the region. Secondly, the M23, there is now almost general consensus, because I think there is a clip that where Kagame was also talking and saying, basically defending himself, because the international community and all the other actors say, normally they say Rwanda-backed M23 rebels.
That's how they have put it.
Yeah, that's how they normally put it. I've seen Kagame trying to push back in the last couple of days, basically saying, no, the M23, the ones who are attacking, who are fighting in DRC, they are from Uganda. I think he has been very open, and I think President Museveni has also accepted in a way that these guys are from here. So, in other words, you have these rebels. I think they tried the fight in around 2012, 2013. Either they were beaten or they were withdrawn. They withdrew into Uganda, and stay there for some time. And I think President Museveni, to his credit, he has tried to push to say, let there be a negotiated settlement in DRC, get these rebels back. And I think that the DRC regime has not really been very forthcoming in terms of negotiating a settlement, and therefore these guys go back. So it's not an overestimation for the Congolese to say that M23 are backed by Rwanda and Uganda. And then, of course, to worsen the situation, you've had Muhoozi's tweets where he says, we are going to finish up all these guys, we are going to chase away the mercenaries and all the tweets. So if you are on the DRC side, you are the leaders of DRC, and you are seeing these altercations that are going on, you are basically saying, no, the Uganda and Rwanda are behind this kind of insurgency and the war that is happening. And therefore, it should not be surprising that there is a war in Goma and in Kinshasa. The Congolese are attacking our embassies and the embassy of Rwanda and others. So if someone was doing really proper early warning, they actually should have anticipated that this would have happened, and I hope they did. And probably in most cases when this happens, you are trying to make sure that you secure the property and more important documents of the government. Remember that we have I think this is 1970. I've forgotten the date, but we had a similar incident in Iran. The Iran hostage crisis, when the Iranians attacked the American embassy. It's a very important case in international law. We normally discuss it with our students, that the whole principle of international law, that every state has a responsibility to protect diplomatic properties, and so. On the attack on the Ugandan embassies, the Ugandan and Rwandan and other embassies, the Congolese government has a responsibility to make sure that these properties are protected. That's a requirement under international law, and I don't think that there is any amount of lawlessness that can justify that the Congolese government did not protect our embassy properties.
You have alluded to the comments that have been shared widely on Twitter by the chiefs of defense forces of Uganda. The words attributed to him are that after the fall of Goma, thanks to the heroic Tutsi brothers in Hotanyi, we can say that the long-awaited redrawing of Africa has begun. We are tired of the stupid colonial white borders. Moses,
I was also intrigued by the amount of tweeting that Andrew Mwenda has had on this issue. And he talks for the government of Uganda, and you feel like, who is Mwenda in this whole situation? The Minister of Defense is silent. The Ugandan Minister of Defense is silent. The UPDF spokesperson is silent. All of a sudden, Mwenda is the one throwing all these tweets.
You just have to disregard because he is in opposition.
I don't know.
But for the person who was opposition, the CDF, we have taken him seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Without it.
When he says in Ngotanyi, I don't know. I hope he understands in Ngotanyi is the other code for the RDF.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah.
So, Patrick, no, the Minister of Defense is not silent, because I think, didn't you host the spokesperson of the army yesterday?
Yes, I did, yes.
You did, so they're not silent. Because he was on this radio yesterday. Talked about this. On Monday.
Yes.
On Monday, yeah, you hosted him. So, they're not silent. Now, on the issue of attacks on embassy, the same question. First of all, if it is a question of that Uganda participating, they have also attacked the US embassy. They have attacked the French embassy. They have attacked the Kenyan embassy. Now, if it was Rwanda and Uganda, you would say these are neighbors who are believed to play a role. But what about the US? What about France? What about all these others? So, that notwithstanding, it still goes back to the same, my original point, that lack of effective control, that you don't have, you cannot protect these embassies in your own country, let alone protect the whole of your country against these groups. As I said earlier, if you cannot fight the insurgents in your country, finish them off, talk to them, have a discussion, have it so that you, as I said, in Uganda we have done it before. We have some ministers who were in rebel activities. Musa Chweru used to be in UPA. He's now a minister in government. Right Honorable Moses Ali, the leader of the Rescue Front, he's a deputy prime minister. These were fighting NRA, UPDF. We had other people who were associated with those fighting groups. Remember, the late Charles Salai, who had been accommodated after the talks. He used to be a minister of state for public service. The late somebody was minister of state for health from Tess also.
Yeah, but in the context of the Congo issue, Moses, when you have a neighboring head of state saying that people who are attacking this time around are from Uganda, that's a serious statement.
I've told you that we knew here that the LRA was in South Sudan. That does not stop us from finishing them off and creating peace in northern Uganda. So it still goes back to our original point that have either finish them off or talk to them and have this ended. Because the issue of M23 has been around for the last, even before President Sekedi, the previous President Kabila, the M23 was there. Now, if, as you mentioned, President Museveni has always told, even at the East African Summit some time back, urged them to talk. Former President Kenyatta was appointed as a facilitator, I think, at some stage of these talks and so forth. He has been shuttling between Kinshasa and other places. I don't recall if his role is still effective, but those efforts have been there from the region, not only Uganda, but from the region. Now, it's better to take advantage of them, talk to M23, and come to a conclusion. Unless you say we have tried to talk to them, they have also refused. But those initiatives are important. Instead of going on accusing who is sponsoring them, who is doing ABCD, you either finish them off or talk to them.
We're going to take a mega milk break.
Okay.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest tonight, I have Mr. Moses Byarihanga, Senior Presidential Advisor, and Godbato Mushabe from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, and we're discussing the crisis in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, Godba, how do we move from here? How does Congo ultimately solve this problem once and for all?
I actually wanted to say that I'm astounded by the way Moses talks about this. Very simple. Say if you have issues with M23, talk to them. I think that Moses, you are underlooking the complexity of the Congo crisis. Remember that there have been multiple attempts to deal with this problem. The most comprehensive of this is the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, supported both by the United Nations and the African Union. And then, of course, you have the East African community. The multidimensional nature of the DRC problem, I think, is beyond an individual state capacity, leave alone a transitional state, because the DRC regimes, the Congo government is in transition right from the overthrow of Mobutu. These guys have been on their heels for years. That you've not had the time to settle down and build your army, build the institutions of state, but also the multiplicity of the players that. Of course, without a doubt, Uganda and Rwanda have vested and legitimate interests in Eastern DRC.
Legitimate in what nature?
Yeah, because this is Uganda's biggest border is with DRC, right from the north to the south.
And DRC is ADF.
Yeah. So no, ADF, I don't know. That's a different matter. But I'm saying if you are a country that has the kind of border that Uganda has with DRC, you have perpetual interest in ensuring stability across that border. If you don't do it, then you are not understanding. Yeah. It can be a problem. So Rwanda basically has a border with DRC And Rwanda has legitimate concerns because it has the former Interahamwe. FDLR. So they are there. So I don't think that, I think it would be wrong to discount Rwanda's interests in this area. My only concern with both President Museveni and Kagame is that they haven't offered the leadership, because you see they are the longest serving rulers in this region. They have the longest history of this conflict. They have been primary actors in the conflict, and they occupy a very significant position in terms of leadership. So each of these presidents have been chairpersons of the East African community. They have been chairpersons of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. My view is that the failure to stabilize the situation in DRC is not only a failure on the part of the DRC government, but also a failure on the part of the regional leaders. I think there has been a lack of leadership in the region, so that's why this conflict is continuing. And I would want to, if you think in terms of scenarios for the future, I believe that this conflict is just probably beginning. If M23 and its patrons are able to hold on to Eastern DRC, and particularly the Goma being a strategic and important town in DRC, you cannot rule out a possibility that the M23 would want to fight towards Kinshasa. If they don't, you can even expect that they can even start working towards secession. In terms of scenarios, those are some of the scenarios that I would be seeing that are likely to happen, given that if M23 holds on to Goma and they're able to establish effective control, then the dynamics of that conflict even change, even they become even more convoluted, and how the Congolese government and its allies, I'm sure they have their friends, and how they respond is going to even add more emergency to the crisis that we're seeing in DRC.
Moses, you're talking about dialogue, and you're giving the example of Uganda to be able to dialogue with the armed groups, and sometimes even a resolution is found. But they've tried to dialogue. What else should the international community do? Who should come in to help in this kind of dialogue? So once and for all, like maybe the Congolese issues that start from way back even before colonial time.
First of all, I want to disagree with Godber saying that the regional leaders have failed to offer leadership. They have offered leadership, but at the end of the day, you must offer leadership to the cooperating parties to the suggestions. I recall, I don't know, was it 2022 or 23, there is a summit which was in Nairobi, and where it was, I think, as of that summit that the former President Uhuru was named as a facilitator, but you don't see this meeting taking place. So, when, for instance, South Sudan offered to mediate between Uganda and the LRA, we sent delegations here led by former Prime Minister Rugunda to those meetings, and the delegations went after delegation, and so on and so forth. Uganda was committed. But now, the whole issue is are the parties cooperating to the talks and so forth? I think they have not been that eager. So you can't blame the leaders, because you cannot force people to meet. But they have been offered that if leadership in terms of President Uhuru chairing these meetings and so forth, facilitating, we have had such a situation. So I wouldn't want to say there's no regional leadership, but so it must come from the participants themselves. M23 leaders and the government leadership in Kinshasa need cooperation, would talk to each other, and so on and so forth. So if there was a question, now if you cannot talk, that's what I said earlier, if you can't go for talks, then you have an army strong enough to deal with that rebel group and finish it off. Otherwise, we are in for, I don't know, at the end of the day, you need talks. You need to talk and have this matter resolved. Unless, if you say, when we went for talks, the issues agreed upon have not been implemented. Then people go back. We have similar situation in South Sudan. At least since another break off between President Salva Kiir and who is the other one? Riek Machar. There has been illegal meetings and so on and so forth. They agreed to a resolution. Now the issue is, when do you have elections? Are we going to have elections? The South Sudan has been saying, no, we are not ready yet. Then now the issues are implementation of what was agreed upon. But now, in Congo, nothing has been agreed upon. And you cannot blame the regional leaders, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with the state.
Okay.
With the government. We're dealing with a rebel group. You can't force them into a meeting.
So, good, but what really caused the withdrawal of the East African standby?
But also, before that, there was a Goldberg mentioned about was it you, or Patrick, about the resources in the Congo and so on and so forth. You see, at the end of the day, if you take that line, I don't think the rebels have capacity to do all that, the mining you expected of those minerals. But if so they did, then where are the minerals going? Because if the international community is receiving these minerals, aware that they have been stolen from the
blood minerals,
yes, then why accept them? Then on that note, the international community should come here and say, these minerals coming from here should not be accepted because they are coming from illegal hands.
Obviously, I suppose the natural resources of Congo are part of the reasons why Congo is in a crisis, like you stated out. But what could have caused the withdrawal of the East African multinational force? Because probably that was an error of judgment on President Tshisekedi.
No, They actually think that the deployment of the standby force really was, my view is that it was premature, because there were already altercations between Tshisekedi, Museveni and Kagame. These three, they have had disagreements and agreements, and you see the deployment of this force was never envisaged from my reading of what was happening. It was never envisaged as a peace enforcement operation. Peacekeeping is different from peace enforcement. Peacekeeping means that the parties are ready, they have agreed to cease fire, and therefore you are trying to maintain the ceasefire. Peace enforcement means that you are coming in, you are going to take the fight to the guys who are indisciplined. And I don't think that the East African Standby Force had taken the posture that they are going to start fighting these groups. Secondly, one of the reports that some of the reports that have come out is that from 2012 from 2017 there were reports that Tshisekedi had agreed to talk to M23 rebels. There are reports that where they went and spent about a year in Kinshasa. But they never got to meet, and then they left. Then they came back to their base. And around 2017, there were reports of sharing of positions of M23 by the Congolese forces. And so of course that's what he said to have triggered off the fighting. The one thing that probably analysts need to understand is that in the current cultures, in the current geopolitical setup, I don't envisage a situation where Uganda and Rwanda would allow M23 to be defeated in the current cultures. So in other words, if there is any possibility that there is going to be a force that pushes back on M23, you are likely to find Uganda and Rwanda involved in one or the other. Because I think that for Uganda and Rwanda, their best negotiating position is when M23 is strong enough to be able to engage in negotiations with DRC. So, yes.
Why should Uganda have an interest in that?
No, Uganda would have to have interest most in the sense that even if it's not for many other reasons, if DRC was to push M23 out of Eastern DRC, their place of sanctuary is likely to be here. So in other words, if I was Uganda, I don't see why I should be there just seated to receive refugees from DRC.
Well, at least the chief of defense forces.
I'm saying Moses, at the basic level, I can try to make sure that there are no refugees pouring into DRC. But at a strategic level,
to receive refugees, then the war continue going on.
No, that's not how these things work, Moses.
Okay,
this is not how they work.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a milk break.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Kamara. My guest tonight, Mr. Moses Biarhanga, Senior Presidential Advisor, and Godbert Mushabe from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. Gentlemen, if you can allow me, we change gears and look into what is going to be hitting us hard, I suppose, and that is the freezing of the federal aid into Uganda, especially in the areas of health and other sectors. Could this be an opportunity, Mr. Biarhanga, that maybe Uganda we can reevaluate and be able to stand on our own instead of risking ourselves to wait for the Americans to help?
Yes and no, but first of all, what President Trump has done, to the best of my understanding, he has freezed aid in both international and within America. Even within America. So, what are they saying? That within 3 months, or those 90 days, they want to reevaluate where they should continue spending money. So, it's possible that after 3 months, they are like some of the areas are going to be reopened. And yesterday, I was watching news this morning. Secretary Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State, who would be like, in our case, Foreign Minister, the new Secretary of State, put some exemptions to the order, the executive order, and some of the exemptions. And even last evening, I watched the press secretary to President Trump, Caroline Leavitt, saying that certain areas, like in the medical and so forth, were exempt. Now, Secretary Manko, from what I read and watched on TV this morning, was that areas of what they call essential medicine or life-saving medicine and so forth are exempt. So the question now is, coming back to you, like the medicine they have been giving to Uganda through PEPFAR, like ARV drugs and so forth, malaria control and so forth, are those part of the life-saving medicines which are exempt or so forth. But whatever the case might be, yes, if it continues, we definitely have to reevaluate ourselves. But from my understanding, the likelihood is that since these are life-saving, the question now would be, how do you define? Because at least I've read that they have exempted the life-saving medicines. So ARV drugs are life-saving in their definition. To me they are, but it all depends on how the matter is interpreted. So, but if it means that if in case it continues after the 90 days and they say, oh, we are not going to send any more aid of this nature, then Uganda has to look after itself. Why not?
Okay, so what do you make of this development on the freezing of aid, Godbert?
Me have no problem with the freezing aid because I think I have argued time and again that in my view there is no country around the world whose business is to develop another. So Americans have interests in Uganda and elsewhere, and so the aid that they give us is not necessarily unconditional. So in other words, we are friends, but they have interests here. So if Donald Trump decides to cut the aid and change his interest, that's okay. For me, what matters to me is, what are we doing as Uganda? What are we doing as the Uganda government to make sure that another Trump in the White House who comes and freezes aid, it doesn't even become breaking news here For me, that's what I'm always focused on. But otherwise, Americans, this is their money. The money they are talking about is from American taxpayers, and they can choose to do what they want with it. So I don't want this to be part of my conversation of like, oh, now they have cut aid. So what if they cut? What am I doing to make sure that when they cut, it doesn't become breaking news here?
So, I mean, how should Uganda, prepare themselves? What should Uganda be doing? I mean...
so if I was President Museveni, I should not have waited for Trump, because, I think we've discussed here, Moses, we've discussed this here and said, Trump is a transactional guy, he's a business guy. He's going to be doing things business style. So, in other words, anybody who followed Trump's first term and who knows Trump and the people around him would actually have anticipated that these things were going to come. So in other words, about a couple of years back, 2 years, 3 years back, if I was President Museveni, I would have been there engaged in cost-cutting measures, right? Cut down this bloated government that is a burden on all of us, channel some of the money into very productive sectors. So I should have been prepared for this eventuality, because my view is that it was inevitable that this is how Trump would run business.
So it appears good, but it's suggesting that there's enough money to cater for our needs, and if we use it wisely, Moses.
Well, to some extent, yes, but also my understanding of the freeze, since it's also affecting Americans, and you see, Trump has set up a new office of the one being led by Elon Musk.
Department of Efficiency or something.
Department of Government Efficiency.
Government Efficiency. Dodge. His argument during the campaign was there is a lot of wastage. So we're saying all this money going for aid, whether internally within America or outside, we need to review it. Are we spending on the right direction? That's why they are giving us 3 months to review, and then it's part of Dodge's work. And yesterday when I was watching the press secretary to Donald Trump making her first press conference, she mentioned that they found some expenditure which was about to go to Gaza of buying condoms, and they said they stopped it. So basically, was saying the sum of the expenditures we have been spending on money are not worth the American taxpayers' money. So that's why they need for a review, and I support that review. It's important. So that, but I'm sure in areas of life saving, they are likely to continue supporting. But still, the African countries or the entire world where this support is going, if it stops, we will have to find means of surviving. Can't fail to survive.
But we've been taking a lot of aid from different parts of the world. Is there much to show for all this money that we've gobbled?
Yeah, for instance, the aid we have been getting from America in terms of health sector has been very effective. Because like now, you talk about ARV drugs. The people who are living with HIV who are using these drugs, it's very effective and it's life-saving. Many of them have been saved. So if you come talk about malaria, they have been, although the money doesn't come in cash, it comes with mosquito nets being distributed. I applaud the American government for the role they have played in control or treatment of some of these diseases.
Good, but how have we been able to utilize this aid for many years? Because if you look back, since we started getting aid, it's billions of money.
It's a hell lot of money. I tried to track it until around, I think, 1992. 1996. I can tell you that under the Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Program, 1987, money poured into this country. And so if you are really looking for that money, you will actually not be able to account for it. But also knowing that the very structure of aid means that almost some of the studies have showed that approximately 80% of the aid ends back in the aid providing countries. Yeah, so normally either in terms of procurement, in terms of consultancies and whatever. So you said we'll report that we spent $100 million in Uganda, when actually 80 million of that money was spent in the US. It probably even didn't cross over to come to Uganda because it was spent there, because normally it's managed by American consulting firms. But having said that, I think that the aid should be seen as a transitional mechanism. Every time you receive aid, you should be working to see how do I make sure that I don't have to look for aid. Yes, at a very, very small scale, when I ran a code, that was like I was almost laser focused and say we are getting grants as an organization. How do we use this money to build our financial capacity to be able to operate and do our research work without having to apply for grants? Right. And I think that's what, even at the national level, that's what should be our mental programming should be. How do we overcome this whole problem of aid?
And that's your parting shot. And Moses, what's going to be your parting shot?
Well, my parting shot is due with the DRC. I think the parties should come together and talk and end this war, because at the end of the day, the region is suffering.
All right, Mr. Moses Byarhanga, Senior Presidential Advisor, thank you so much. And Mr. Godbatum Shave from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, thank you. And you, the listener, I also want to thank you for the privilege of your company. Good night, and God bless Uganda.